now a little past 12:05. We got more people popping in. This will happen at the lunch hour, but we'll get going and respect folks' time, and we'll have you back to finish your lunch and back to work or whatever it is well before 1:00. But we want to get you informed and excited, and I know I am because my future executive counselor is with us today. I live on the Seacoast, as you may know, and Lisa Kennedy Sheldon is the Executive Council District 3 candidate for this part of the state. And it's really a pleasure to have my friend Lisa here today. Lisa, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm great, Steve. Thank you. I can't believe I'm actually on your podcast. Having been introduced to it and started watching it, it's just exciting to be the person on the other side of the screen with you.
Well, I'll be a little self-effacing. This probably won't change your life, but it will improve your life. So that's good.
Okay. I think it could be a life changer. I don't know.
Change your life. I think, look, I know that when you win in November, it will definitely positively change life for a lot of folks. The 1/5 of the state that lives in this part. We're going to do an oversight, some kind of an overview of the district for folks to really help them understand why this is such an interesting, competitive, and flippable seat in 2026. But just to warm up folks for a minute, before we get into the nerd stuff for a few, tell us a little bit about yourself just to whet their appetite for our conversation afterward.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Steve. So as many of you know, or you might not know, I have never run for elected office before. This is a first. And I'm very grateful to have a family, particularly my son-in-law, Ethan Underhill, who has been talking politics with me for years, say, you could actually do this. You have the experience. You've lived in New Hampshire. You understand what's happening right now. And I bought in. I've been complaining since 2016 rather loudly, and got a little worse in 2020, got a little worse in 2024. And now it's time to do something. So I'm happy to step up and serve my community.
Well, you know the state very well. Those of you that hopped on for the first few minutes before we started recording here will know that you got decades all over the state, professionally, civically, family life. We're going to get all into that. And I think it's part of a very rich set of experiences that are really ideal for the job that you're seeking right now. But why don't we take a few minutes here? I'm going to share the screen, and I apologize for those of you that will be listening to this after. We're going to record this and put it on as a podcast. You'll have to use the mind's eye for some of this. We'll get it on the Substack at stevemarchand.com as well. But I'm going to share the screen and the magic of Substack. So this is about highlighting some really interesting competitive districts, some of which maybe folks aren't that aware of, and obviously spending quality time with the candidate who is competing in that district. And so today we are talking about Executive Council District 3 and our friend and guest, Lisa Kennedy Sheldon. So just very briefly, what we're doing, it's a bit of a pitch. That's why we call it Pitch Deck. A brief overview of the district, some of the factors, some of the nerd stuff that make it, I think, so compelling. Second is we're going to have a conversation. Lisa and I warmed it up a little bit, but then we'll have some time, 25, 30 minutes, and get you all to get to know Lisa a lot better. Executive experience, 22 years as a nurse at St. Joseph's, outstanding interpersonal skills and executive skills that combine for really a great candidate here. And then we'll do some Q&A. We have the chat. If you have some questions or comments, we'll take what we can for the remainder of the time, maybe integrate them into our conversation if it goes with the flow. Just very briefly, and you can get a lot more of this at the Substack at stevemarchand.com, but spent a lot of time analyzing the data of New Hampshire politics. And there are a couple of different analytical tools that I use a lot. I'll refer to in the next 5 or so minutes to get into the belly of Executive Council District 3. One of them, a very important one, is called the Partisan Voter Index, the PVI, and it really just says over the last several elections, how much more Republican or Democratic is a town or a precinct or a district voting than the state overall in statewide elections. And in New Hampshire, the general story has been that in federal elections, it's been voting more Democratic, and thus we've generally been winning those races, president, U.S. Senate, Congress. But at the state level, it's been more challenging over the last decade, and there's been a gap there. That's a big part of, I think, what Democrats will have to do and what I think Lisa's poised to do to be successful in 2026 and beyond. The second metric that I'm increasingly using is called PACO. It's points above expected candidate outcome. And it seeks to pull out the characteristics unique to the candidate, her or himself, that help them rise or fall beyond what we would call a replacement level or relatively unknown Democratic candidate might have done in the same race. Generally speaking, the higher the number, the better the Democratic performance was for that specific candidate. The third thing we talk about is trend lines. Where are things going? I've got one graphic here we'll look at in a minute that I think is key to EC3 and why it has become such an intriguing opportunity to flip in 2026. Not all districts are created equal. They are snapshots in time. Some are heading towards us rapidly, like many of the suburbs, and some are floating away from us, including some of the rural and blue-collar kind of mill towns. And it makes for a mosaic of always moving towns and cities across the state. And then qualitative factors. The quality of the candidate, the campaigns they're running, the matchups, the things that the human element that takes it off of the spreadsheet and into the battlefield of politics. Now, we won't spend a ton of time today, although maybe in the conversation, on the role of the executive council in general. I see that we have at least one former executive counselor, Deb Pignatelli from Nashua, a dear friend, awesome civic servant for New Hampshire over many years, and glad to see her here today. She knows the executive council as well as anybody. There are 5 seats in the executive council. Right now, it's 4-1 Republican. The one Democratic seat by Karen Leote Hill is in the gerrymandered district that is quite Democratic. We'll show you that in a moment. And she's expected to hold that seat this fall. Of the other 4 seats, there's a misconception. It's a big part of what I want to communicate today. A lot of key donors or key activists, media, over the last several cycles have said, well, in the gerrymandered maps created several years ago by the state Republicans, the 4 Republican districts are ruby red. They are not able in most cycles to be won by the Democrat. But that's not true. They are Republican leaning, but leaning is the key word in that sentence. None of the 4 districts, including this one we're talking about today, are even as red as R+3. And as you'll see in a moment, anything between the threes, between a D+3 to an R+3, the ones that hug 0, are the most competitive in the many years that I've been doing these ratings. And in a Democratic leaning year, like the one we're looking at, it means it's a really competitive district. In order for Democrats to win the majority, of course, the 5 seats, we must hold Karen's seat in District 2, and we must win at least 2 of the 4 seats currently held by the GOP. Consider all campaigns as basically 3 concentric circles. The big one, the outside one, is the macro political environment. These are the things that Lisa or me or most of you watching have little direct control over, but are very important. The Trump job approval rating. UNH came out last week with their latest number. It's 38% statewide. If he's at 38%, it's going to be probably a heck of a night for Democrats this fall. Right direction, wrong direction, economic data, the price of gasoline, the competitiveness of the gubernatorial election. UNH released that number last week as well. It has Cindy Warmington, our presumptive Democratic nominee, down only 5 points. She hasn't even begun doing any paid advertising yet. And it's a 44-39 race with more than 15% of the voting population saying that they are undecided. So this is a competitive gubernatorial race, which also portends good things for Lisa here in EC3. We go to the purple circle, the dynamics of the district. These are the things that we have some control, not all, but some. And they're the PVI, like I mentioned. What is the leaning of the district? What are the trend lines in some of these communities? And What are the potential towns where there's an opportunity for somebody, in this case with Lisa's profile, to overperform over what a typical Democrat would do? And I think there's some great opportunities there. And then we get to the green. This is the part this is what campaigning is all about. This is what the candidates, the matchup, the current incumbent in EC3 is Janet Stevens. She's been there for a few cycles. She lives in Rye and has been a counselor since, I believe, the 2020 election. And this is a district that is quite competitive. We see some opportunities when we go under the hood about matchups that are available, and that I believe strongly that Lisa is a uniquely good matchup here in the nitty-gritty with a campaign that is set to rock and roll. So I want to take a second here, and again, we'll have these up on the Substack by tomorrow, so you'll have a chance to look at some of these in more depth. The Executive Council playing field. I mentioned that there are 5 districts. If you look at the pink bar that goes across, that's the competitive zone. That's anything between D+3 towns, districts that are 3 points more Democratic performing than the state overall in recent elections, all the way down to R+3. That you see the black line, that's 0. So if you go below, it hugs the 3s on both sides. And those are the races that are most competitive. The blue bars for each of the 5 districts represent my current projection for the PVI, the Partisan Voter Index for 2026. If you look at them all, they're quite competitive. The one that is Karen's, the gerrymandered Democratic one, you can see it's a D 8.5. That's a safe district. That's extremely blue. But look at all 4 of the Republican-held ones. The current projected number is well within the range of the most competitive zone in my rankings. This is, again, the misconception that people have that it's redder than it is. None of these are anything other than light red heading into a Democratic-leaning year. Even better, look at these numbers. These are the numbers of how the districts acted just in 2024. My blue, the PBI, is a rolling average to kind of smooth out noise in the data over several cycles. This one represents just what happened in 2024. Look at districts 1, 3, and 4. All of them acted less Republican last time than my rolling average. And that's not a surprise when I look under the hood, because what we find is that all of 3 of those districts are slowly moving in a Democratic direction. So that rolling average is moving towards us. It's a snapshot of a moment, but if I were to make it a dynamic figure, if anything, that number would be slightly less Republican now than it was even a year ago. So it's not just that it's competitive, it's that the trajectory is getting better quickly over time. So here, I just want to show you guys real quick. We're going to try to zoom in. This is a statewide of the PV I was talking about. Whoop. Oh, okay, let's see if this works or not. Well, something just happened there. Let me see if I can. There we go. Let's try this. So these are the PVIs, and I want to give you a feel for what the district is. The district is the southeastern portion of the state, and what we find is that the here on the coast we have some very blue, the Portsmouths, the Newmarkets, and so forth. These are very blue and getting bluer. When we get over to the western part of the district over here, Salem, Pelham, Windham, these are the redder part of the districts, the redder parts of the district, rather. And so it's an interesting kind of 2 districts within 1 district. Although what we'll show you in a second is that a lot of the ones that are reddish, some of the key towns like Windham, are actually moving towards Democrats quite quickly. So just because they're still Republican leaning, they are moving in a Democratic direction. This is to give you a quick idea of where the population centers are in the district. And hold on here. There we go. We'll fix that. There we go. Whoops. Let me fix that. There we are. Portsmouth, you can see that's about 8% of the district. Over here, we have some of the bigger towns in the district, including Salem, and Windham is growing. But look at this. Some of the bigger towns are also towns that are blue or trending blue. Hampton is a significant part of it. Newmarket is a fast-growing part of it. You see, Portsmouth is a very big part of it and extremely blue. That's an important part of the way that Lisa is going to win this November. And then we have a number of these suburbs here that are also growing pretty quickly, and they're getting blue quite quickly. So these are very important parts of the district as well. I believe I hear a train going by, Lisa, near where you live in Portsmouth.
That's exactly what that is. It's a little backdrop.
Look at that. If you like folks that wanted texture, you just got texture. One of the last slides I have here is what I call moving on up. Part of what makes Executive Council District 3 so interesting for me, and I think it should be for all Democrats, donors, activists, the media, is that many of the communities are moving steadily and in some cases quickly towards Democrats. All of the towns that I have in this chart, and there's a bunch of them, I don't want anybody to get a headache from this, but this is over the last 10 years. Some very blue towns continue to get bluer. Exeter has gone from D plus 11 to D 14.7 over the last 10 years. That's a big number. Newcastle has gone from D plus 5 to D plus 13 in 10 years. That's an enormous, a half a point a year would be big. This is 8 points in 10 years. Stratham has gone from D plus 1.5-ish to almost D plus 7. You can see Rye is another town that has moved. And even as you go down, and again, you'll be able to see this on the Substack later, even some of the really red towns have been moving towards Democrats. Atkinson, Windham, Hampton Falls, Londonderry, as this chart shows, even the towns that are still red, many of them are moving towards Democrats quickly. That has an impact on the overall PVI, which I described earlier, and it's a really big deal. So we can, in some of the Q&A, we can recall some of this. We can, and certainly you can refer to it. But I wanted to provide just an underpinning of the texture of the district, why it's so interesting, how it's become quite competitive, and so we'll get back to this as well. Shame on me. You can go to LisaKennedySheldon.com. We'll make sure we flash this back up towards the end. But if you want to learn more about Lisa in the interim, you could follow along. You can check out her website while you're watching the remainder of this. You can also donate there as a recovering candidate. Shame on me if I do not have a current candidate and do not promote that as well. So we're going to do that. Let's see here. And I am going to stop sharing visually so that we can start sharing some conversation. There we go. All right, there we are. So I hope that's helpful. But anyway, I want to bring Lisa back in. And there's so much to your background that I want folks to get to know here. Why don't you walk us through a little bit about your career path, and then we'll connect it to the Executive Council. But talk a little bit about your career. It's a varied and very sophisticated career.
Oh, okay. Well, sophisticated. That I've actually never heard someone say that. So let's see if I can make it sound that good.
There you go.
So I am at my core a nurse. I went to college at St. Anselm College and went down like a lot of people and left New Hampshire, like maybe some of our young people in our families have done, and went to Boston. There I got a master's degree from Boston College, and then I became a nurse practitioner. And I have to say, to this day, being a nurse is one of the things I think I've learned the most about life, about people, and certainly in cancer care about how to talk with people during difficult times, challenging times, and finding hope and growth in those moments as well. I think we're in one of those times, and I'll talk a little bit about how going on and getting more education taught me to look at it both from a scientific point of view as well as from a caring point of view. I thoroughly enjoyed being a nurse and a nurse practitioner, but it came time and we raised our 4 children here in New Hampshire, my husband, Tom, and I, and I love being in New Hampshire. We had the opportunity to raise them in Bedford, spend time in the summers up in the lakes, and just enjoy the beauty of our state. And I feel very grateful that we're still here. And not only are we still here, but now our children are starting to come back and even bringing a grandson. So I've been a mother and a grandmother for a long time in New Hampshire, and I love that. But I did discover after my children were born, that I had a craving for more education, that I love my clinical practice, but I really wanted to understand the science and the evidence about how we decided the best treatments, the best supportive care for people with cancer. So I went back and got a PhD. My PhD is in nursing and cancer control and research. And then I did a postdoctoral fellowship at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and taught at UMass Boston for 7 years in their PhD program. So I have an experience both as an educator and a researcher and a clinician. But I want to stress something that I still believe to my core for myself as a person is that being a nurse, being at the bedside or chair side, I worked in the cancer center, was fundamental to everything that I did. So no matter what job I had, I always went back on Fridays and worked at St. Joseph Hospital in Nashua and got to work with people facing some of the toughest days in their lives, but also got to work with a team in making sure they got the care they needed right through COVID, right through the recovery from COVID, and even worked in the vaccination clinics in very cold parking lots around the state while we all recovered from COVID. So I've had a really wonderful career, and then I had the opportunity to become the first chief clinical officer at the Oncology Nursing Society. That's actually the largest oncology nursing society in the world. It's 35,000 members with a reach of 100,000. And I was their first chief clinical officer. So having that executive background, creating budgets, managing people, developing policy statements, and then serving on the National Cancer Policy Forum in Washington, D.C., gave me a whole nother perspective about how on the macro level, nurses are actually influencing care and outcomes for people with cancer. So I got to dream big and then always come back on Friday and be back down right beside a family. And the biggest number in the world was that one patient, no matter what everything else happened. So I feel very fortunate to be able to do that and to take teams around the world for both healthcare and cancer care, and see that nurses around the world are the same. So you'll never hear me not talk about nurses because I love what nurses do and I love nurses everywhere. Now that makes you say to yourself, well, what the heck is she running for political office for? You want me to jump in there, Steve?
Yeah, because I think that's the segue. That's the natural question.
Of course. So, as I slightly alluded to, my being disgruntled with politics has only peaked in recent years, but it started a long time ago. And I was fortunate enough to have our son-in-law living with us at the time during COVID, and we had many, many political discussions at that time about everything from vaccine to safety to public health policy. And just as a side note, just so people know this, our budget in New Hampshire, which is close to $8 billion this year, of that $8 billion, 44% is health and human services. 44%. So there is no other person on the executive council who has, I think, my level of experience, both from the clinical side as well as from the executive side, about what we need to be looking at so that healthcare becomes accessible to all people, even our most vulnerable in the state. So, okay, that aside, you heard my background, you heard about COVID, you heard about what I believe, but why am I running now? Well, we've had Janet Stevens in this position as a Republican for 3 cycles now. She's the incumbent. Janet Stevens does not have a background in health or an executive background. There are significant issues with how the executive council, and that includes Janet Stevens, are voting in a partisan way and actually creating their own micro legislature at the level of the executive council. Why is this not right? Our legislature, the Senate and the House of Representatives, actually vote in law. The executive council does not do that. The executive council approves all contracts in the budget over $10,000. The executive council approves all appointments for commissioners, judges, all the way up to the state Supreme Court. The executive council has the ability to decide which contractors, so in a selection process, get the bids for different things, including roads, health and human services, child welfare and education. So they have a lot of power that I think most of us in the state of New Hampshire don't appreciate. And they have the ability to table pre-approved budget items based on partisan politics. This should not be happening at the level of executive council. They are not legislators. So when I see this happening, I become increasingly frustrated and feeling like I, as a taxpayer, as a citizen in this state, I'm not being represented in the executive council. And I'll pause there for a moment, Steve. I know you have a question.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a moment ago the ability to table, which you take an office that is not well known in the state, frankly, right, compared to the Senate, the House, obviously the governor, but with a significant amount of power. And it seems like a lot of that power, unfortunately, is in the power to stall. It's in the power to stop, right? It seems defensive in nature and thus maybe harder to highlight for everyday folks. You know, it's hard to make news with the absence of a thing happening being the critical move. I believe just this week or in recent weeks, we have examples of the council kind of sitting in a very partisan way on funds that are very important and causing a lot of problems for pretty vulnerable people.
Sure. So I can pick up two examples that I'd like to tell you about today, because these are examples where when I'm learning more and more about the executive council, listening in on the meetings that they have every other week with the governor, that I'm realizing there are other things happening besides yes/no votes, that there are discussions happening. There are tabling of items that are supposed to be voted on in a way that makes me feel that this council is not necessarily carrying out the rule of law from our legislature, and they're using this to advance a political agenda. The first example I'm going to give is of the family planning and reproductive health monies in the state. For 5 years in a row, the executive council, including Janet Stevens, my opponent from Rye, have tabled that money. They have said no to the money to family planning clinics. Why is this important? Because it's not just about family planning clinics. This is money that's in the budget that the legislature is said is budgeted for these clinics. It's 15,000 men and women who get their health care in these clinics. And it's not just about family planning and birth control. It's about cancer screening. It's about sexually transmitted infection detection and treatment. It's even about low-cost vasectomies. So this is not just a women's health issue. This is about men and women getting health care at these centers. And the fact that the Executive Council has decided that no matter what other legislative bodies have voted, that they're not going to give away that money because they don't like what's happening at Planned Parenthood or women's health or family planning clinics. Okay, so there's example number one. This is unacceptable to me as a citizen. These are my taxpayer dollars. My legislators voted this in. It's not happening. The second example I want to give you happened just a couple weeks ago as I was listening into the Executive Council meeting. And this I found particularly disturbing, that there was free money, and I say free because it comes from the federal government. It's there for our taking. And it was $1.2 million. And that money was earmarked for training, online training programs for early childhood educators. Okay, so why is that an issue? They were going to learn about autism spectrum disorders and learning disabilities. Certainly important across our public education system. But they use the language DEI.
No.
And by D, they were talking about diversity of learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorders. They used E to talk about the equality that all children in the public education system should have for whatever they need. And inclusivity is how to include these children with their peers so that they are feeling normalized and integrated into their own social circles. So why is this happening at the level of the Executive Council, and why is it not getting more press? Why do they have this control?
It's the politicization that you described earlier, and it's the fitting of anything possible into a very simple and terribly partisan narrative. I think the example you give there, the second example in particular, if it can be fit into a narrative of DEI, which has been warped into meaning whatever is convenient for the politician saying it. Then they could say to their base, "Hey, look at this! I fought DEI and I won. We won the fight." And no, and it requires folks. And I know Karen, as the only Democrat on the executive council, part of the reason she needs friends isn't just for camaraderie here. It's to amplify the what you're talking about today, and obviously to get to a majority to be able to pass these things, to approve them, to move them on. Um, it's this kind of gets to a question of, you mentioned earlier, over 40% of the state budget is HHS related. Uh, it would seem to me that the expertise in that background could not be more critical, given that fact. What help the layman like myself who are not in a healthcare background? What are some of the practical ways all of those billions of dollars apply in our lives? Maybe not all of our lives every day, but many of our friends and neighbors around us. Where does the hit happen when we mess that up?
Sure. So the most obvious example would be that the executive council actually approves the commissioner for DHHS. So this is, of course, who gets put in that position is very important. When we think about some of the other commissioners like education and what happened when we had a commissioner who put through a voucher system, it changed everything, including our property taxes. Now, at the level of the DHHS, that's something slightly different than the educational system because we're talking about new contracts that are going to be coming through. And I'll give a very recent one, which would be the Medicaid changes that are about to happen. And part of that money, not all of it, part of the money is federal, but a third of the monies for Medicaid are going to come out of your tax dollars. What's going to happen is that they're putting in new requirements for people to be receiving Medicaid. Usually these are people who cannot work or are unable to work for one reason or another. Could be disability, it could be age. There are lots of reasons people can't work, why their income is so low that they don't have their own insurance. With a lack of now the Affordable Care Act now declining, people are no longer enrolling as much as they did before because the waiver is over. More and more people are going to wind up on Medicaid. What's really key about this are some of the regulations that go with it, and that includes the 80-hour a month work requirement to be able to get Medicaid. And it's an online system right now, which means that people have to have tech savvy. They have to have internet network. They have to have 5G, and they have to be able to log in and clock their work in there. What's missing in there is that there's $2.2 billion of unpaid caregiving going on in the state right now. This is the AARP estimate, and that will not be included as a working hours for these people who are already on Medicaid. So if you're an older person on Medicaid before Medicare, if you're on Medicaid and you're working, taking care of your elderly spouse, a disabled child, this will not count as your work requirement to receive Medicaid. So now we're leaving people at having healthcare insurance that costs more money with a system that's impossible for people to use and no longer having the healthcare accessible that they may be needing. So there are lots of reasons why the contracts that are going to come through, for whether that's the telehealth system that they're using on Medicaid, the work reporting system, the technology training, all have to happen in order for this to work so that we don't have more people coming into the emergency rooms uninsured, uncared for.
So, let me step back for a second. The nursing background you have, um, it strikes me as not just unique from an expertise, but this unique connection of executive experience with the empathy or the ability to engage with people on a personal level that is so powerful. And I think most of us, we've all received the help of a nurse at some point, actually from birth, typically, right? It's some of the first people we see in life. What do you take as the most valuable experiences you've gotten from a career in nursing that that you believe give you unique ability to perform at a high level in elected office now?
Yeah. Oh, I often say, we had all of our kids actually worked in the service industry, but not in healthcare. So they all worked in the restaurants, during high school and college. And I said, it's going to give you people skills. You're going to have to learn to work with all kinds of people. And frankly, I think there's no better training for life than training to be a nurse. I mean, we're the most trusted profession every single year, except for 9/11, right? When it was firefighters, as
Right.
it should be. But we're always the most trusted profession because we always put the patient first. And my goal is to extend what I understand about caring for people and caring for patients, to extending that to caring for my community, caring about my state, and caring about the most vulnerable within our state. And so I hope that that translates in a way that actually people understand that I am there to take care of them. I'm there to ask the questions. I will translate your questions. I will get the answers and I will bring them back to you because information is what will give you hope and give you a reason to move ahead.
You alluded earlier to international work. Talk a little bit about maybe where and what you took away from that, and what are some of the common threads you see, regardless of what country you're in, among nurses. What is the common the brother and sisterhood of it that you found in your travels?
Yeah. And so I love to talk about that, and I don't want people to say, "Oh my goodness, where has she been?" But it's so when you have the opportunity, as I did, to be able to be a nurse in other locations and to bring teams with us to either teach or provide healthcare, you watch that nurses around the world are actually speaking all the same language. That we always put the patient first, that we put aside what our particular needs are, sometimes to our own detriment, as any nurse, if there's any nurses on here, you'll understand. Um, but we always put the needs of the patient first. And when I was at the Oncology Nursing Society, every question that came to me, the one filter I had was, what will help me give better care to my patients? And I see that anywhere I go in the world. And I think for this office in particular, at this time with my qualifications, I would say it the same way. What is it the people in my district need so that they can live better? They can grow their families better. They can develop a business. They can age with dignity. They can have the services they need to live here, to stay here, to enjoy New Hampshire just the way I do.
What about the district itself? Obviously, it's a fifth of the state. There's some diversity, economic diversity, uh, certainly political diversity between some of the seacoast communities that we looked at the map earlier, all the way over to Salem. Uh, Folks may not know, all part of the same county. Rockingham, and most of this district is Rockingham County. There are a few Rockingham towns not in the district. There's one non-Rockingham town in the district, town of Pelham. We love you, Pelham. You are part of this, and when you look at the needs of this district, how do you see balancing what may be some different priorities between maybe our friends on the coast versus our friends closer to the Salem area?
Yeah, it's such a split personality, right, in this district. And you alluded to that before, that we have a lot of these very blue areas, but we have a lot of very pink areas in this district. And some of it has to do with sort of the region. So we have the seacoast area where we're thinking more maybe about tourism. We're thinking about flooding potential and roads and bridges. I mean, those are not inconsequential. But then when you look at the mass border towns, you see that there are people living, and commuting and working in Massachusetts and then coming back over. So they're living here maybe because of taxes or better schools or better quality of life. And so we have that. We have this sort of the center of this district, sort of in Derry area where we have a lot of commerce growing. People want to make sure that they have good school systems, but they're feeling the burden maybe of tax of their property taxes now, and that's feeling like a bigger burden. Or maybe they're working and they have to deal with gas prices for their particular company. Um, and so we have some very different areas. We have some very rural feeling areas as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We
So
do.
So I think for me as a candidate, I think the most important thing will be to get out there and learn more about it and talk more. I mean, I may have lived in different parts of the state. Bedford is not in my district.
Right.
I worked in Nashua, not in my district. But I do want to understand more and more about what the needs are because they are so different. And I can't assume by living in Portsmouth that I understand the issues of the other towns in this district.
Something you said a moment ago, I hadn't really thought of it before. Probably an above average number of commuters, we could probably find the data, as a percentage of your constituents commuting into Massachusetts, and are probably more directly impacted, for example, by spikes in the gas price, for example, or by degraded or a lack of upgrade of up maintenance on road conditions. A lot of the district hugs Route 101 on the northern part of District 3. Those few towns in the county that are not part of District 3 tend to be on the north side of Route 101. It kind of neatly ends up being kind of the border. And over the years of driving to Manchester all the time from the seacoast, you can see the increase of the exits, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way over to Exeter. And over the years, you see in the morning more cars kind of merging in and the traffic going up. That's not changing, I don't think, anytime soon. And so that's probably a pretty important part of what folks are thinking about.
Sure. Well, New Hampshire's a great place to live. I mean, why wouldn't you want to live here, right? People have been coming over the border to live here for a long time. We don't have state income tax. We don't have sales tax. But it also makes it a draw for other people to come into our state. So it's not just for, I'd rather buy a washer and dryer in Nashua, right? It's
Right,
right.
right.
But they also want to come to our state to go and, enjoy the natural beauty of a state where you can go from the mountains to the ocean to the lakes. I mean, it's an extraordinary state to have this all in one place.
One of the things that I tell all my the friends, Democratic friends running for office or in office, is it is my experience that most voters across party lines, including the very voters who are the swing voters in elections like this, that maybe have been voting Democratic for federal office, maybe a little more Republican over the last decade in the Sununu Ayotte times for state office, and that has proven to be a real split in which party is winning and which side of the ballot, up or down the ballot, uh, is you can be concerned about the things that need to be improved in New Hampshire, really high property taxes, concerns about the quality of your local schools or the threats to it, healthcare, which you have alluded to and, with great depth, and still love the state and still be really optimistic about how awesome a place it is. I will surprise people at events that we are, I think, the sixth least native state in the country. And it means there's an awful lot of people in our state. The 60% of people, adults here, were not born here. And that's not like most of the country. Right? I mean, I used to be like, I'm a native, and I thought that would be a win. And then folks would be like, what? You think you're better than me? And I'm like, no. I realized most of the room was not from here.
Yeah.
Indeed, I was at an event in your district, Hampton Falls, and it had folks from Hampton Falls, Kensington area. There were about 25 people. At one point, I said, raise your hand if you're from New Hampshire, born here. And I raised my hand, and nobody else in the room. Nobody, 0 people raised their hand. And it shocked everybody in the room, but it tells you how much people find this to be a desirable place to be. So how do we build off of that, right? And take an awesome place and make it even better. And I think in District 3, I don't know the number for District 3. If you were to split it up, I could probably figure it out. But I think that it would be even less than 40%. That are native here, particularly these border towns that you were mentioning before. So they're not just into the idea of tax-free, appliances. They like what we got going on.
Yeah.
We can make it even better.
Oh, yeah. I think so. One of the things I was looking at when I was exploring this role was what's called Transparent New Hampshire. And that's where the whole budget, and I told you, for this year, it's about $8 billion. Over these 2 years, 2026, 2027, it'll be $15.7 billion. It's really a lot of money.
Wow.
So I thought I'll go to this Transparent New Hampshire, and this is where they show where all the money's going, who are the contractors, what's happening there. And interestingly, something I'm going to have to pursue is the fact that there's no, zip code on there. There's no address for who we give contracts to. And if we want to make this a state where people want to live and stay, then we have to make it a place where it's a good place to do business. And we have to celebrate our local contractors and our local talent and use them for jobs where it's appropriate in the state. So one of the things I'm going to be looking at as executive counselor is, where are these companies that we're giving all our money to?
It's a great question. I mean, the um, recirculation of dollars within the state or regional or local economy, when we're able to do that, I haven't seen a very recent step, but several years ago, I saw something about an 8-to-1 power of the dollar. When a dollar that is made in the region, say the state in this case, is recirculated by being spent in the state, you get far more power than that first generation of the transaction. And I mean, this is exactly it. That's a nonpartisan position. It strikes me that would be very attractive across party lines.
I mean,
Uh,
talk about it's just me putting on my executive hat, right?
yeah,
It's just like,
exactly.
so who's actually getting the money for all this? I mean, it would be nice if there were preferential treatment in some way. I
Yeah.
don't know how that would work, and that's something certainly for our whole government to look at. But where we could actually have preferential treatment if we can get the same job, wouldn't we want to use a New Hampshire contractor or I don't know. I used an example the other day, the line painter on the road.
Sure.
I mean, is there a reason we'd go to Maine and get that contractor? Because that's where I found one of them. And I thought, why are we using somebody from Maine? We have painting machines right here. Why don't we use our local contractors?
I think so. Tie goes to the Granite Stater or something to
Yeah,
that effect,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
So, in our remaining moments, campaigning,
Yeah.
you entered the race officially pretty recently.
Mhm.
As you mentioned at the top, first time running for any elected office, although you followed this over the years. You went to DC, right? Representing, I think you said about 35,000
Mhm.
nurses. So you understand the system. What's it been like in the early days as a candidate? What has surprised you? What what has confirmed your expectations as a candidate early on?
Oh, that's a great question, Steve. I think I'm enthused and invigorated because people are really paying attention this year. I think at the national level, I think people are tired of being lied to. You can say the same lie over and over again, and then it still does not become the truth. And I think people are looking for something different. They're looking for a responsible government that they can trust. And I think that comes down even to this district and to this state. And I think when you're looking for candidates, you want to find people who have experience, but they're going to be taking care of you. They're going to be looking out for you. They're going to look out for your bottom line, and they're going to respect their taxpayers. And they're going to have somebody who's accessible and will listen to them. And that's really been the best part so far, is the listening. I have really enjoyed meeting so many people over the last 2 months and hearing about what their concerns are and what they'd like to see happen at the state level. So
That strikes me as an
it's
answer
great.
a career nurse might say, right? I mean, isn't that a big part of being really good at that job?
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I wrote a book about it. So I guess that's yes.
Yeah. Okay. What was the specific? What was the book?
It's called Communication for Nurses, Talking with Patients. 25 years ago, when I was deciding whether or not to go back and put my family through me getting a PhD, which was not a small undertaking,
Yeah.
definitely a family effort. I decided, well, one way to channel that energy was to write a book for nursing students, because I felt like one of the most underutilized and sometimes the most important tool you could use was how you use your words and your presence and how you could be authentically available to somebody, especially in cancer care, where people are facing some of their greatest challenges, and you have to be able to know when to talk and know when to be silent and know when to be reassuring and know when to not let anger get in the way of a good interaction.
How much of that can be taught? How much of that is innate?
Um, that's a really good question. So of course we always build it into simulation now when we're training nurses. You know, how would you respond when a patient says this and or that, and what's the best way to teach? I mean, so it's definitely a lifelong skill. I don't pretend just because I've been a nurse a long time or I wrote a book about it that I'm the best at it. I think it's something you work at every time because everybody's unique, and you have an opportunity to use common civility and polite ways to start conversations. And then each person, when you get in there, it's another story. And it's just fascinating to be able to have that opportunity. I assume sometimes that maybe like pastors or priests have the same experience where you just like every person. It's amazing.
It's funny you say it that way. Something I think about uh, folks who are successful in a given field, and how if things had been a little different somewhere, usually relatively early in their lives or their careers or their education, the skill set could have been tweaked just a little bit and they could have ended up very good at a very different field because the skills have the overlap. I asked somebody this a few weeks ago, and I liked the way they were thinking. So I'll ask you this: there's a movie, I think it's a Gwyneth Paltrow movie from a number of years ago, Sliding Doors, and it is interesting when you play out if a key moment had been 10% different, how so many other things in your life would have not necessarily been better or worse, but almost certainly would have been different. Is there a kind of a sliding doors, you look back at earlier in your life that maybe it's the thing that nudged you towards nursing and the career, but if things had been a little different, you probably were heading in a different direction, your geography, your career. Do you look back, is there kind of a sliding doors moment like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I heard you ask that one. So
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it, and I'm going to answer it not from a career perspective. I think one of the best things you can do in your life is pick a good spouse.
Yep.
And I think meeting my husband was a sliding door moment for me. And, we've been married over 40 years. As I told you, we got married here in Hollis
Yeah.
and raised our family here. And when you have a good spouse to take this journey with, it makes all the difference.
That's a great answer. I mean, I think you're making me think our 25th wedding anniversary, Sandy and me, is, and we clearly did not plan this. It's election day 2026. Nothing says romance like looking for turnout numbers in Newmarket.
Oh, I don't know. You're going to have to come up better than that one.
Right? I'm gonna have to come up with something good. So we probably won't be getting dinner on our anniversary because it's gonna be a pretty busy day and night. And by the way, my wife loves politics about as much as I do. And so maybe it is fitting that at least for the actual anniversary, we'll be wolfing down some Chinese food while waiting on, Hillsborough 42 House District, no, whatever.
Oh,
Uh,
excellent.
uh, but you're right. If you get the spouse right, it's gonna be all right, isn't it? And I've had the pleasure of meeting your husband, and he's great. He's a really engaging guy,
Yes.
very successful in his own right,
Yes.
and so it's a fun couple to watch. That like two real good folks. Okay, we've approached 1 o'clock here, and we promised we'd get folks out of here by about one. Why? Let's remind folks if they would like to learn more about you, if they'd like to get involved, obviously, if they'd like to donate, whatever the case may be. How do they do so?
Oh, well, we have a website, so it's lisakennedysheldon.com. I think Steve showed you our Act Blue
Oh,
account.
I'm
You
gonna
set a
share
QR
that
code.
again right now. Continue,
Yeah.
please continue. I'll just
Oh,
hit that.
sure. If you have a group, I'm gonna put out a plug here. If you have a group, a church, a and it doesn't have to be Democrats. If you have a group that would like to talk with me, I'm very interested and talking about the issues that are really kind of burning right now for all of us, about cost of living, about the sort of the trust in government that we're all looking for. I would love to talk with them. You can email me at Lisa4NH at LisaKennedySheldon.com. You can go to the website at LisaKennedySheldon.com. And I hope to hear from all of you, and I hope I can win your support. Thank you, Steve, for this opportunity.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. For folks, I will, if you didn't get a chance here today, some of the vast majority of folks will consume this after the fact, which is sort of a fun wrinkle of this world of Substack and podcasts. I will have this up at stevemarchand.com shortly, and you'll be able to watch the full broadcast. We'll also have it on as a podcast episode. You can get that at Apple Podcasts. You can get that at Spotify. We'll also put it up on my YouTube channel. So whatever your preferred way to consume content, which is, I guess, what the kids call it, you can do that. And obviously, we're going to be very engaged in this race because, like I said, it's critically important and it's really winnable. And I think that one of the takeaways today is not just Democrats should compete because we can or because winning just for winning's sake, but because we've got awesome candidates running, and that I hope you get the sense, if you've made it this far, by the end of this conversation, that we have a real opportunity to upgrade, particularly in this case, with over 40% of the budget being HHS related. Having somebody like Lisa able to be at that table to provide that oversight and wisdom and experience, it's hard to find. And we got a chance to do it this year. And shame on us if we don't put the foot on the gas pedal to try to make it happen. So I want to thank everybody who was watching live with us today. Those of you that have listened or watched live or on the broadcast, and join us at stevemarchand.com for more information about this race and so much else in New Hampshire. And I want to thank Lisa one more time for taking some time today at lunch to join us.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks all for listening and watching. We will see you all again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.